I'm making this video today to speak about my first astral projection experience that happened this morning. I believed in it, but I wanted to experience it for myself just before, I could actually say, yeah, that's real. And it felt like I was being pulled out of my body, but it was the weirdest sensation. It was like I was being pulled out into a dome shape because I felt like I was expanding. I felt like I was fat. I sort of panicked in a way because it is quite scary. It's not exactly normal, and I got sleep paralysis, which I've had before. I used to get all the time. I've had a few funny, weird sleep paralysis things, like I was lying in my bed like I can't move.
Sleep paralysis is simply when your mind wakes up before your body does, and your physical body is still paralyzed, and actually your brain does that to your body to protect it from acting out during a dream. So it's sort of a defense mechanism, but I'm not an expert, but somewhere, somehow, something goes wrong, and then your mind wakes up before, and you're conscious of everything, but you can't move.
I just couldn't move and I couldn't breathe. I was just stuck, frozen.
You have no control over your body, no control over, you can't speak.
Kind of like, all I could do was look around, I was paralyzed, I couldn't talk, anything. All I could do was just use my eyes. So I'm looking around, my body is basically asleep, but I'm not, I'm awake.
My whole body was just completely frozen. I mean, I could open my eyes, but...
It started off with this noise, this rushing noise, like a heavy bass in my head, but that was probably just like the blood rushing through my head or something.
I sometimes wonder, why this happens to me.
When we begin to fall asleep, we go through 5 different stages, ranging from light sleep to delta sleep, all the way through to rapid eye movement sleep, or what is more commonly referred to as REM. Now, it's in this 5th and final stage of sleep we begin to experience heightened brain activity. So much so that this is when intense dreaming tends to occur, and a form of paralysation kicks in to stop us acting out whatever we're doing in our dreams. Now, 99.999% of the time, this paralysation fades away before the REM stage is even over.
So basically what happens is that sometimes you have chemical imbalances in your brain, and chemicals like neurotransmitters like melatonin and serotonin, sometimes what happens is that because of the imbalance, your brain wakes up faster than your body. So you'll end up being awake, but then your body is still paralyzed.
I think sleep paralysis has allowed me to become aware that there's more to life than the physical realm.
And so if you have had experience with sleep paralysis and you experience some phenomena, don't let somebody else convince you so easily that it's all hogwash, it's make-believe, because everything happens for a reason.
It's like when you're in a dream and you try to run away and your feet are frozen, or when you try and scream and you can't make a sound. It's exactly that same sensation. The only difference is you're completely aware, you know you're awake, and you see everything around you.
Before I knew it, I was still thinking, but I wasn't, because I wasn't controlling it. It was sort of like a dream, but I was still sort of awake. I think that's like a lucid dream thing, and I had that before when I was like 5.
I called one of my friends, and of course, like, a lot of people don't believe in this stuff. They think it's a medical condition, sleep paralysis or sleep apnea, or linked to anxiety. And I've had people tell me, like, oh, it's anxiety, but I don't have anxiety, and I know I don't. And I know it was different because I saw it like clear as day.
I am going to put this out there so that if someone else is going through it, then they won't feel so alone. And for me, that was the case. I didn't really tell a lot of people about this thing that happened to me because there was kind of like, I felt really weird about it. Like, why is this happening to me? And, people are going to think I'm such a weirdo. And, it's kind of like when a woman it's kind of like miscarriage. When a woman miscarries, there's some sort of guilt and shame, and you just don't tell anybody. But it's a very common thing. So what I learned in my research was that sleep paralysis is actually a very common phenomenon, okay?
I just woke up from sleep paralysis experience. I've had them many times. I used to have them when I was a kid. I used to be afraid of them, and only until recently I did something. I followed advice from a doctor who I've listened to speak. He describes and explains ways to get over it and sort of embrace it in a way. And that stuck with me, and I hoped to remember that when I was in my next sleep paralysis experience, which didn't happen for a while after I watched that interview until this morning.
And I'm going to tell you about my experience with something called sleep paralysis. I know a lot of people out there have had sleep paralysis. Happens to me from time to time. Is what will happen is, well, I'll wake up and I'm unable to move, and I'm unable to talk. I can't move or talk. And I feel this pressure on my chest. It's this pressure just pushing on my chest, and I can look around on my eyes, roll my eyes, but I'm just paralyzed.
I woke up and I was in the shell and I was trying to wake up. I was trying to, speak, tell my roommate, because he was in the room, wake me up, help me out. And nothing was working. My friend walked in and was talking to my roommate, and I was completely aware of this. Like, my eyes were closed, but I could see them. I know it sounds weird, but I could, see them, very aware of what was going on, and I heard exactly what they were saying. And so I was yelling for them. I'm like trying to, wake me up, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't wake up. I couldn't get any words out. I couldn't move my hands. My hands were tingling. They were like fuzzy feeling, kind of like falling asleep feeling, but not really. And you're not in your body. You're all like up in your mind. It's totally trippy. And it was kind of scary at first, because I knew one of my friends happens to him. And I was getting really scared, and I'm like, because I thought I was never going to wake up. But I remember, it happens to him quite often, so I was like, I'm probably going to wake up eventually. But it took me like it seemed like forever, but it probably took me like 5 minutes to get out and wake up. And once I woke up, I told my roommate. He thought I was crazy. Everybody else thought I was stupid. But told my one friend, and he's like, yeah, that's what it is, and it's very scary.
It sounds like a very medical term, but in my view, it's a very spiritual phenomenon.
Started out feeling as if I was dying, but then eventually I thought I was having an involuntary out-of-body experience. And I kept telling myself, I'm going to go with this. I'm going to let this happen, because this could be really cool.
It's pretty cool to be able to leave your body and be in another state and be able to just fly anywhere. I mean, leave the house, outside, physically. It feels like you're physically flying.
I had one experience that was incredibly positive. I think it was a gift. It was a beautiful experience.
This has sort of drawn me into lucid dreaming, which is slightly different in that when you're dreaming, you become aware that you're dreaming, but you're not paralyzed. You can move freely within the dream.
I felt myself elevated off of my bed, slowly elevated off my bed, and I felt some extreme amounts of energy surging throughout my body, and I began to spin all around crazily.
I was dragged by my ankles by an unseen force down the hall and up the stairs. All of a sudden I was back inside my bed.
on back now. Come on back to the booth here in the lab. It's time to be ending the session. You've been gone quite a while now. Come on back. That's better. I can see that you're back now. Very good. Well, welcome back. How was your experience?
Oh, wow. I started out from here, sort of floating up through the roof of this, through the ceiling, and I went up, out through the building, and I was looking at the building from up above. And then it was like I flew over the whole scenery here up to like a cabin that's up on the hill, and I was looking at the cabin from the outside. And then from there, I was out in this space. All of a sudden, I felt this being come close to me, and couldn't really see it. I could just sort of feel this energy.
There is information elsewhere. There is information beyond the limitations of the physical body, beyond the limitations of our 5 physical senses. And it is our mind that gives us access to those things. It is our very own thoughts. It is the essence of us, the soul of us, that allows us to know these things.
Bom, sair do corpo, todos nós saímos diariamente. Além da necessidade que o corpo tem de descansar, de efetuar mecanismos reparadores durante o sono serve para que a consciência possa sair do seu corpo diariamente e usufruir das dimensões espirituais. Só que como no planeta Terra há pouquíssima informação espiritual e pouco estímulo, incentivo, o sistema educacional é péssimo, forma as pessoas como ignorantes, forma as pessoas como cegas espirituais, as pessoas não têm muito estímulo. Então, o que acontece normalmente, o que eu tenho observado, é que elas saem, se desencaixam no corpo quando vão dormir e ficam geralmente dormindo ao lado do corpo ou até mesmo executando algumas ações na dimensão extrafísica, mas sem consciência de que ela está realmente na dimensão espiritual. E algumas pessoas, sem querer, acabam tendo um pouco de lucidez acerca desse momento, dessa saída fora do corpo. E aí, como não há informação, como não há preparo, e como as pessoas estão cheias de crenças, de ideias preconcebidas sobre a realidade espiritual que não são verdades, as pessoas se desesperam desse momento de lucidez fora do corpo e tudo que elas querem fazer nesse momento é voltar imediatamente para dentro do corpo. Com o desespero, com a agitação mental, a pessoa se atrapalha um pouco nesse reencaixe entre a consciência e o corpo físico. E o que acontece? Demora alguns segundos para a pessoa voltar, reencaixar para o corpo. É claro que para quem passa por essa experiência, a pessoa acha que dura uma eternidade, esses breves segundos que a pessoa passa tentando se reencaixar para o corpo. Mas isso acontece justamente por causa da agitação mental, o medo que a pessoa tem da experiência, que na verdade, se a pessoa for olhar bem, não tem perigo algum. Eu me projeto, eu saio do meu corpo diariamente durante muitos anos e nunca passei por uma situação que oferecesse algum tipo de perigo, nunca passei por alguma situação que envolvesse risco de morte ou alguma coisa que pudesse me ferir, me machucar. Sempre foi útil, sempre foi positivo, agradável, e sempre aprendi muitas coisas e nunca teve nada de negativo nas minhas experiências.
Então é importante a gente também ter a noção de que a projeção consciente, essa chamada experiência fora do corpo, é um fenômeno fisiológico, ou melhor, parafisiológico. Todo mundo passa por esse fenômeno, independente se admite ou não essa realidade, né? O fato de eu ter medo de uma realidade não impede ou não faz essa realidade deixar de existir, né? Então, esses medos que bloqueiam o desenvolvimento lúcido do parapsiquismo acabam levando as pessoas, durante o fenômeno da projeção, a ficar num quadro de sonambulismo. Às vezes ficam dormindo sobre o próprio corpo, ou quando não, vagando por aí, né, extrafisicamente, né, através do corpo emocional, do corpo do psicossoma, como a gente também conhece, né, a nomenclatura aí. Psicossoma é o corpo objetivo, esse corpo que leva o indivíduo, ou possibilita essas projeções da consciência, né? O indivíduo fica vagando num estado de sonambulismo, né? O sonambulismo extrafísico, ele é uma espécie de preâmbulo de um quadro negativo, um quadro patológico até certo ponto, né? Que é chamada psicose extrafísica ou parapsicose extrafísica. Psicose por quê? O indivíduo está numa dimensão diferente da dimensão física e ele não vive de acordo com aquela dimensão, ou ele não atua conforme aquela dimensão, né? Então há uma falta de sintonia entre a consciência e o ambiente que ela está se manifestando. Da mesma forma que tem psicóticos aqui na dimensão física, o indivíduo não vive a par da realidade, né? Extrafisicamente isso também acontece. E acontece principalmente pela falta de acuidade, pela falta de lucidez da consciência quando fora do corpo físico. Então essa condição de desenvolvimento do parapsiquismo, um parapsiquismo lúcido, um parapsiquismo também que visa a interassistencialidade, esse parapsiquismo ele abre possibilidades para a consciência que ela mesma nunca tinha pensado, né? As experiências de projeção consciente, elas permitem o indivíduo a sanar vários medos que dominam, às vezes, a existência de muitas pessoas. O medo da morte, que é o chamado pai e mãe, né, de todos os medos, né? Quando esse medo ele é superado, visto que o indivíduo durante a projeção ele consegue perceber que a natureza dele não é uma natureza física, biológica. A natureza da consciência é multidimensional. Essa autoconscientização em relação às múltiplas dimensões, aos outros veículos de manifestação, além do corpo físico que nós possuímos e podemos nos manifestar, faz com que o indivíduo tenha uma plenitude maior, uma compreensão maior até da razão. A razão da existência física começa a ser vislumbrada pela própria consciência, pelo próprio sujeito que passa pela experiência.
As frightening as it is from time to time, it has never caused me any real physical harm. It definitely did cause me some emotional stress in the past, but I find this to be a really unique insight into either the human mind or the spirit world, and whatever it is, very few people have it, and to experience it is something very, very unique and very special. I'm definitely glad I have the opportunity to see some things that very, very few people get to see.
I'd like to know how many of you have ever woken up unable to move or cry out, can't move a bit, can't say anything. Or sometimes it might happen just as you're about to fall asleep, but you're awake and you can't move. The reason that I start with the question, have you ever found yourself awake but unable to move, is that avoids projecting or inserting any of the strange details that wind up connected with this thing. You simply ask, did you ever wake up unable to move? If so, what happened? And then, if everybody tells you the same thing, which turns out to be what happens, it's impressive. But if you said, have you ever woken up unable to move and you sensed something strange in the room and you heard footsteps and did you feel like you were going to die? Who knows what the answer to that question means because you've already provided the suggestion. Sleep paralysis is the experience of awakening, unable to move. Or sometimes it happens just as you're about to fall asleep, suddenly finding yourself unable to move but not yet asleep. and is produced by a physiological mechanism in the brain that's well understood. What is not understood is why at least somewhere around 80% of people in sleep paralysis have this very complex, strange, subjective experience that we've been discussing. Right from the beginning, I was convinced that ordinary people are smarter, are more sensible than they're given credit for by scholars, and that traditions that are widespread and deeply held probably have more rational basis and more observation built into them than the theories that I was taught in graduate school. Not by any means all. Certainly there are lots of traditions that have serious logical and other errors in them. But I couldn't believe that all of the beliefs of ordinary people that are not part of the academic worldview were therefore nonsense. In fact, I had the impression that the academic worldview might be just a little too narrow. The spiritual experiences, the ones that interest me most, so that includes sleep paralysis with a frightening presence, it includes near-death experiences. These are all experiences that are built into spiritual traditions all over the world, and that in the Western modern world for at least the past 100 years have been explained on the basis of psychopathology. So the discovery that those experiences are common, that they occur among normal people, that they are not in fact indicative of any kind of disease, has tremendous importance for medicine. It really, the change in diagnosis that it should make would be to, I think, perhaps dramatically reduce the rate at which people are incorrectly diagnosed as having not just psychological problems, but major psychotic problems. A colleague of mine, a psychiatrist, also interested in sleep paralysis, did a survey of professional psychiatrists, giving them a description of a perfectly typical sleep paralysis episode with the frightening presence, etc., and asked people what they made of it. Over half of them diagnosed it as a psychotic episode. Most of them thought the person was schizophrenic. That's appalling. One of the big questions about experiences like these is, why are they so little known? The reason that improper theories, such as the psychopathology theories, have been able to be applied to these experiences and beliefs is that they were thought to be very rare. How could they be thought to be very rare when they're actually very, very common? They're thought to be very rare because they're rarely admitted to. They're rarely reported. Why is that? It's because people don't want to be thought insane. When I interview people about these experiences, they often tell me that I'm the first person they've told. I say, well, why didn't you tell anyone? They all say the same thing. I didn't want people to think I was crazy. Nobody likes to be thought of as naive and credulous and uneducated. So that's a stigma. But then when you get into the 20th century and psychiatry becomes a powerful force and psychopathology becomes an official label which can cost you a great deal if it's applied to you. It was very bad to be diagnosed as psychotic. And that in itself is unfortunate, the stigma that Western society places on mental illness. But that being said, that being the case, the assumption and the constant reiteration of the claim that these kinds of experiences, seeing things that people ought not to be able to see, hearing things that they shouldn't hear. We say things, you're hearing things. Well, everybody's hearing things, you know. By hearing things, we mean, and you're hearing things that aren't there. And you're seeing things too. And that is sort of the cardinal feature of being crazy. So you add craziness to too primitive, uneducated, naive, credulous, you've got all the stigma that you need to make people not want to admit to these experiences unless they're in a cultural frame that somehow makes it permissible. And then they only speak to each other.
This has been going on for about an hour and a half. She's stuck in a state of sleep paralysis. I've tried everything to get her out of it. I've been moving her arms, moving her legs, giving her something to drink, talking to her. She's stuck in it. This isn't just today. This is about a 2 or 3 time week occurrence. Sometimes it's every day. But you can see she's trying to talk, but her mouth and face can't even move. She's paralyzed.
I was very careful not to make any sort of extravagant interpretation about this throughout my career. I just let the data speak for itself. But what I have been able to do, and was very intent on doing as I went along, was testing all of the explanations that came forward. And all of those explanations are clearly wrong. It is not produced by cultural context. It's not only not culture bound, it is not cultural influences on sleep paralysis that put in the content. The content is there across cultures, and it's the same content among people who have never heard of anything like it before. You don't need to know about it to have the real thing. So it's not cultural. There are some subjective experiences we know that do have physiological causes, but you look at them and they're all very simple. That is, they have just 1 or 2 features. So people recovering from alcohol intoxication, people who are alcoholics, they're detoxing, one of the experiences they often have is the feeling that snakes or spiders are crawling over their skin. Okay, that has a physiological cause. Well, we know what causes that, we know the mechanism of it, and we know why anyone feeling that, if they were in a situation that would produce a hallucination, would hallucinate little things crawling on their skin. Okay, but that's simple. That's one thing. That's as complex as we can get. If you look at schizophrenia, we know that schizophrenics often hear voices commenting negatively on them and their behavior. But in sleep paralysis, we have, what did I have in my index of features? There were over 30 individual features that recur in all different settings. They recur in the same way, in roughly the same order, always in the same general relationship to each other. We don't have any conventional explanations for an internal production of an experience of that kind. Unless you wanted to use, actually even if you wanted to use Jungian collective unconscious and archetypes, Jung never proposed that the archetypes would unfold, I'll call them sort of subjective narratives of this length and complexity. He saw the archetypes as being expressed in very different ways in different settings. You know, what I'm trying to do by staying close to the data, I'm not trying to insist, well, therefore it's got to be supernatural. I'm just saying, well, if you don't like the supernatural explanation, tell me the other explanation. Or work on it until you come up with another explanation. And it's important to me to say, but don't say to the person who's had the experience and believes that it was supernatural that they're being irrational. They're not. They're being perfectly logical. And the more they know about the experience, the more logical their conclusion. For a lot of people, identifying something as supernatural is done by saying there's no scientific explanation for this. So it's a residual category. It's the things that science can't explain that become supernatural. Well, we're not saying that. When you talk about sleep paralysis with this presence seeming like a supernatural event, we're talking about positive identification of the characteristics people have always identified with spirit things. Comes through the wall, floats in the air. You can sense things about it. It does things to you in weird, spooky ways. Einstein used the term spooky force or spooky action at a distance. and you're lucid through the whole thing. You are wide awake, and when it ends, you remember it perfectly clearly, not like a dream. You just feel that all that happened was you moved, and when you move, the thing is gone. That's a spare description. Now, I'll give you, there are lots of other features that frequently come into this. I will describe to you the first time it happened to me, which was before I'd ever heard about it from anybody else. I was a sophomore in college. I was taking, I'd gone to bed early. It was after my last final exam in the fall semester. I was very tired. Being sleepy, sleep deprived, which I was, makes this more likely. So I was primed for this because I'd missed a lot of sleep preparing for exams. So I went to bed early. I woke up hearing the door of my apartment open. And I thought, it's probably somebody coming to see if I want to go to dinner because I'd gone to bed so early. And I heard footsteps coming across the room. And then I found I couldn't move. And that was very frightening. Then I felt the bed pressed down as if somebody was climbing up on it. And then I felt what felt like someone kneeling on my chest. And then I felt hands on my throat. The hands on the throat is less common. I've had lots of other people describe it, but it's not as common as the pressure on the chest, the bed moving, and the footsteps. The thing that you have to be careful about is that where people theorizing about spiritual things and in a scientific way, the risk is that when you start to theorize in those directions, you wind up with a sort of scientific music or poetry that doesn't actually specify anything in particular. It just gives an appearance of, well, at least we're speaking in science terms now. Well, that might not be that big an advantage because at the end, when we're doing that, we still have to say, we don't understand what we're saying, though.
I was sleeping in my bed, and there was a presence in the room.
I was paralyzed in the bed. He seemed like a shadow.
Probably about 6'5", well over 6 foot, very tall.
There was someone sitting on my chest.
Sitting on top of my chest.
The lady was old and haggard. She had straggly grey hair. Kind of an old woman standing in front of me.
And there was an old lady.
This just was not a nightmare. I know that I am awake when this happens.
Can't escape from this entity that has entered your room.
It's a feeling of perhaps the greatest terror that one can imagine.
I felt every inch of my body on the bed, and I felt every inch of everything that was touching me. And then I felt this presence, and I didn't know whether it was over me, beside me, or anything. I just felt this presence. And then I felt like the breath was getting sucked out of me. Like no matter how hard I tried to inhale and breathe, I couldn't. And then finally, I snap out of it, and I wake up, and I sit up really fast, and I look to the left of me, and then all of a sudden, like, I just see this shadow figure. And it wasn't a tall one. It didn't look human. It didn't look like anything. It just looked like a shadow, and it was maybe, I don't know, off my bed's like here, and it was maybe this high off my bed. And it was just like this oval shadow type thing.
First thing I remember as a child at night, I had just gone to bed. My mother just put me to bed, and I could see the lights on in the living room. I had just laid down for bed. I could hear my parents, I could hear the television, and I looked up, and to my right I saw a couple, very shadowy, very dark, in my bedroom. A man and a woman, and they started walking towards me. It was very frightening. I couldn't speak. I wanted to call out to my mother. I couldn't call out to her. I was just terrified. And right about that time, she walked into the room, and it appeared that she walked directly through the two people that were standing to my right. And I began asking her, who are these people in my room? What's going on? She kept telling me that it was just a dream to go back to bed. And I said I wasn't asleep, it wasn't a dream. I could hear the television on in the other room.
And I freak out and I jump back, but then I realize, like, it's probably my dog. And then I, like, look to see where my dogs are, and they're sleeping on the ground, like, right beside, on the other side of my bed. So then my heart, like, freezes, and I look back over, and then the shadow figure just shoots up to the ceiling. And I'm telling myself, like, leave, 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 leave. And then it just goes through the ceiling, and it's gone. So I'm freaking out because never have I had anything like that happen to me before. But I have had the whole sleep paralysis happen to me maybe 3 or 4 other times. It started when I was 18, and I'm now 21. Oh yeah, but when I woke up, it was around 12:30. So it was all within, a span of 20 minutes. This all happened.
As soon as I become aware that there's someone in the room, I'll go into a paralysis, and I can't move. I can't shout out. I can't, I'm unable to call for help, and I'm unable to stop any kind of attack. Usually it's an attack. You can't move, you can't scream. Feels like you've been drugged somehow. The Shadow Man, and this is just a recent label that I've put on this character. The closest I've seen of him is the arm, because it's been around my throat several times. He's very violent. He doesn't use any caution whatsoever. He could care less if my neck is broken. I mean, that's how violent he is. Generally, he's accompanied by a very old woman. She's rather short, draped in many layers of clothing. She looks like a homeless type person. Like all of her belongings are on her. Shawl, jacket, a hat. The old woman will sit on my chest, and she's not extremely heavy, but she's heavy enough that it's very hard to breathe. It's extremely hard to breathe. I can't get my lungs to expand. I can't move. He's got my arms down usually, or just the way she's sitting on me, I can't move, and there's nothing I can do. The fear is extremely real.
I've been hit by like an unseen force. It hits my chest. It penetrates right through my head, through my body, through my chest. Yanking my legs hits me so hard at times where it knocks me off my mattress. Sometimes I'll wake up after getting assaulted or after getting paralyzed, and I'll see a stream of black or white smoke just kind of streaming out of my bed, my pillow next to my face, or just floating in midair. It's putting so much fear within me that I'm unable to sleep, that I feel that I have to keep opening my eyes to see if there's something in the room. And it's affected my mood, it's affected my depression, it's totally rendered me literally useless to society, useless to everybody.
there's a sound you hear. It's like a high static sound. You hear your voice called sometimes.
Sounds made with instruments, things I could pick up by hearing.
Some people will hear a tone or beeping sound. Sometimes people will hear name calling. We have no idea how that works, but it doesn't seem like it's a tone that's out there in the real world, but it's something that is played on the nerves, so to speak.
Hearing the tick of a clock.
Sometimes I felt it as if something were drilling on my head.
I heard laughter.
Why doesn't my husband wake up? Why can't he hear this?
Wondering how the whole neighborhood couldn't hear this sound.
Episodes or attacks of sleep paralysis I have, I hear some strange noise. It'd be in my head, you know, it'd just be there. Noise would just be there in my head, you know, as if it's not like, just there. And I hear it out loud, like I'm hearing it with my ears, but it's in my head.
I was starting to fall asleep, and then next thing I know I was asleep, and then all of a sudden I started hearing this noise in my ears, and it was kind of like, I don't want to say ringing because it wasn't really a ringing. It was kind of like a womp 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 sound. I don't know. It was really weird. It just kind of reminded me of, I don't know, how some kind of machine would sound or something. It was really weird, and I started hearing it, and so it started getting louder and louder and louder. And then the louder it got, I realized, like, okay, I need to wake up.
Basically, what'll start happening is I'll be coming out of a dream or something, and I'll start to wake up. I'll realize I'm in my bed, and then I will I'll be awake. I'll think I'm awake, but I'll have like this noise in my head. Very much like what Cassette Master was describing, like a noise inside my head, not exactly in my ears, but more like in my head. My head is like feels like it's gonna vibrate apart. It's so intense sometimes. It's like really loud.
I woke up midway and I couldn't move, and I'm thinking like, oh shit, here we go again. You know, and I'm like, okay, this is the last straw. However this shit is going on, it needs to stop, because this shit is uncomfortable as hell. But I didn't actually say that. I was thinking about it, and I really thought about it with my energy and my emotion. And I kind of called it out, whatever the entity was. And throughout this whole situation, I can hear the noise, I can hear the growling. It was kind of like... kind of like that, and I'm not trying to scare anybody, so if you know, that's not my intent. I'm just trying to relay my experience.
So as I'm like on my bed, I start hearing these almost a humming noise and like a zzz type noise, and so first it's the humming, and you know that goes on for a while. I don't exactly know the time, but it could have been seconds, you know, but to me it felt like a long time. So anyways, I hear that. I start hearing like almost like a buzzing sound, you know. So that happens, and it gets louder in pitch as far as what he was hearing. So that happened, and then that kind of went down. All that buzzing noise, humming noise, all went down.
But I'm trying to tell myself, like, wake up, wake up, wake up, move, breathe. You know what to do. Like, you are aware of what is going on right now. Fix it. And I couldn't, and it felt like forever, and the noise in my ears was getting so loud that it was painful.
I heard this noise in my head where it's this strange buzzing noise. It's not just simply like a buzzing noise. It's complicated. It's very complicated noise, very weird sounding buzzing noise. It's just weird. And it was varying in pitch.
It's a very terrifying feeling.
It's scary.
Well, some people, it's a very terrifying feeling.
Basically, it's the most terrifying thing in the world.
But it scared me so bad.
It was kind of scary.
And then just really scared the mess out of me, and
it's kind of terrifying.
But what happens is, during this lovely stage of paralysis, you wake up mentally. You become cognizant of the fact that you're laying there asleep, and you're still paralyzed in that stage of sleep for, sometimes it's only 10 seconds, sometimes it's only 5 seconds, sometimes it can feel like an eternity. I'm sure everybody's experience is different. But essentially, you wake up and you fucking panic. And this is the reason why you see people who make like weird squeaky noises when they sleep, people that are like, eh! Or why you see people like snap themselves awake. It's probably because they're in the middle of a terrifying sleep paralysis experience.
Dentre os medos mais comuns relacionados a fenômenos parapsíquicos, a gente pode citar a catalepsia projetiva, o fenômeno da projeção da consciência, ou a chamada experiência fora do corpo, e também os fenômenos de clarividência espontânea. Né? Se a gente fosse elencar aqui as relações que existem entre esses medos e questões traumáticas, a gente poderia falar um pouquinho sobre o estresse pós-traumático. Tem pessoas que desenvolvem um verdadeiro trauma emocional quando experimentam esses fenômenos e os interpretam de uma forma errônea, uma interpretação desadaptativa. Então, vamos pegar um caso aí da catalepsia projetiva. Aquela sensação de paralisia, né, que o indivíduo acorda geralmente à noite, de madrugada, ele se pega desperto, só que ele não consegue mexer-se, né, na cama, né? Ele sente uma paralisia. E geralmente a pessoa tende a interpretar, a pessoa que não tem informação, não tem um conhecimento maior sobre os fenômenos parapsíquicos, ela tende a interpretar isso como morte, né? Como se ela estivesse morrendo. Né? É obviamente que essa interpretação de ameaça acaba gerando uma resposta emocional muito forte. E essa resposta emocional fica vincada na memória, né? Quanto mais a gente mobiliza emoção, né, diante de uma experiência, mais a memória fica fixada. E depois, isso pode gerar dificuldades posteriores, né? As dificuldades posteriores são quais? A pessoa ela acaba querendo evitar falar sobre morte, ela evita qualquer sensação, qualquer coisa que possa colocá-la em algo parecido com o que ela experimentou, né, naquela experiência que para ela foi traumática devido à sua interpretação. Então ela evita buscar informação, ela evita ter novas experiências parapsíquicas, ela não se dispõe a fazer exercícios para sair do corpo. A gente vê isso com muita frequência, às vezes nos próprios cursos, né, que envolvem esclarecimento quanto à questão de projeção e fenômenos correlatos. Né? A pessoa ela quer informação, mas ainda ela tem uma resistência muito grande a se permitir ter uma experiência mais sadia em relação àquilo, até para que ela consiga ressignificar, né? Dar um significado mais apropriado para aquilo que aconteceu. Então, se fala muito hoje de transtorno de estresse pós-traumático, mas não se fala muito do transtorno de estresse pós-traumático parapsíquico. Quer dizer, são experiências que envolvem paranormalidade, parapsiquismo, que o indivíduo teve, às vezes, num momento da vida em que não tinha muita informação, não estava muito lúcido, tampouco os cuidadores, os pais tinham uma boa informação para poder orientar e ajudar a criança ou adolescente a dar um significado apropriado, e a criança cria, ou o adolescente cria um verdadeiro trauma em relação a isso. Né? Agora, a gente entende que os cursos de conscienciologia, os cursos de projeciologia, eles vêm ao encontro de ajudar essas pessoas também a superar esses traumas, visto que a pessoa tende a evitar. Essa evitação sistemática faz com que a pessoa ela perca uma parte da realidade multidimensional que é a mais importante. Né? Nós somos consciências multidimensionais. Nós não somos esse corpo físico, essa massa de matéria, né, biológica. Né? A nossa consciência transcende tudo isso. E o indivíduo ele fica vivendo a par, né, ou à margem dessa realidade. Né? O que é uma lástima.
I'm just saying, like, when it comes back, and it might come back, I know exactly what to do, and I'm not going to be fearful.
You know, the fear for me is gone. You know, I used to be like panic attack when that would happen. You get those noises in your head, you don't know what's going on. You know, you just came out of a dream, and then all of a sudden, you're like, it's hard to describe.
It's about getting out that trance, because if you break out halfway and you lay your ass back down, it's about to happen again, and it's going to keep happening. You got to get up. If you really, you know, you got to get up and you got to shake it off. You got to go get you a glass of water. You got to get up, though. You got to break out of that trance, because if you lay back down, that shit going to happen again.
Fear. And I've gotten over that for the most part. But now I have to master control.